rubber.
Mm-hmm.
But then others kind of get knocked down and they just stay there. Well, that's what we're diving into today. It's resilience. And believe me, you don't have to be a superhero to develop this superpower. We've got some great sources to help us unpack this whole thing. We're going to be looking at a guide from the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, that's the CAMHA, and some research on resilience in youth and young adults under stress from Frontiers in Psychiatry, a review of resilience literature from the National Library of Medicine, and we'll even touch on some practical tips from the Mayo Clinic.
It's a fascinating topic, because for a long time people thought resilience was something you were either born with or you weren't.
Right.
But more and more research shows that it's a process. It's something we can actively develop.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. What exactly is resilience?
Well, the CMH guide really emphasizes that it's not about avoiding hardship altogether. It's about experiencing those difficult emotions,
Right.
the pain, the distress, but using strategies to adapt and to cope.
So not just grinning and bearing it, but actually learning and growing from those experiences.
Yeah.
So it's not about being tough, it's about being more flexible.
Exactly. And the National Library of Medicine review actually takes it a step further. They highlight how resilience is a dynamic process shaped not only by, our individual characteristics, but also by our social connections, family dynamics, even cultural norms. It's a whole ecosystem.
So nature and denurture. That makes a lot of sense. Now, this research from Frontiers in Psychiatry on inhibitory control really caught my eye. It's also called IC. Could you break that down for us?
Sure. IC is essentially our ability to regulate our thoughts and our impulses. Think of it as a mental muscle that helps us resist temptation and stay focused on our goals. What's interesting is that researchers found a link between resilience and something called non-emotional IC.
Non-emotional. So not about controlling your feelings, but more about controlling your actions, even when you're not feeling super emotional.
Precisely. It's about those everyday decisions, like resisting, that tempting sugary snack or sticking to your workout routine, even when you'd rather stay on the couch.
That's so interesting because I always thought that emotional control, keeping those feelings in check was the key to resilience.
It seems intuitive, right?
Yeah.
But this research suggests that it's actually non-emotional IC that's more closely tied to resilience. While emotional IC, the ability to manage feelings directly, was more strongly associated with psychological distress.
Wow, that's a real aha moment.
Yeah.
I'm already starting to rethink my whole approach to self-discipline. So if I'm understanding this correctly, having that baseline control over our actions, even when things aren't emotionally charged, actually builds resilience.
That's what this research is suggesting, and it might be because non-emotional IC helps us develop consistent habits and routines that support our well-being even when we're faced with challenges.
So it's like building that solid foundation so that when the storms hit, you're less likely to crumble.
That's a great way to put it. And it ties into other individual factors that Frontiers in Psychiatry explored, like optimism and self-efficacy. That's the belief in your own ability to handle things. Think of it as having, a well-stocked toolbox for dealing with life's curveballs.
Okay, so we've got our metaphorical toolbox. What kind of tools are we talking about here?
Well, SUMH offers some practical strategies, and one that really stands out is the idea of reframing crises.
Reframing, like looking at a situation from a different angle.
Exactly. Instead of seeing a challenge as a threat, can you reframe it as an opportunity for growth? For example, if you experience a job loss, instead of seeing it as a failure, could you see it as a chance to pursue a new career path that you're maybe more passionate about?
Oh, that's such a powerful shift in perspective. And it reminds me of CMH's advice on focusing on what's controllable, especially when you're feeling really overwhelmed.
Yes, because when we fixate on things we can't control, it can lead to, those feelings of helplessness and despair. But when we focus on what is within our power, we regain a sense of agency and we can start taking action.
It's like that old saying, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Absolutely. And speaking of taking action, the Mayo Clinic offers some practical tips for enhancing resilience. One that resonates with me is the idea of learning from the past.
So not dwelling on past mistakes, but actually extracting valuable lessons from them. I like that.
Exactly. It's about reflecting on those times you've successfully navigated challenges in the past. What strategies worked? What strengths did you discover about yourself? By recognizing and applying those past successes, you're essentially building a resilience playbook that you can refer to in the future.
It's like turning those past challenges into valuable training sessions for future resilience.
Sure.
But it's not all about going it alone, right? We've touched on the importance of social connections, and I know both CMH and the frontiers in psychiatry research emphasize that.
Absolutely. Having
Mhm.
strong social connections, supportive family, friends, community is a major factor in resilience. They provide a buffer against stress, a sense of belonging, and a safe space to share your struggles and your triumphs.
It's like having a team of cheerleaders in your corner reminding you that you're not alone in facing those challenges.
Yeah.
And CMH reminds us about the importance of self-care as well.
Yes, self-care is crucial. It's about prioritizing our physical and emotional well-being even when life gets hectic. Think of it as, putting on your own oxygen mask first before helping others.
Because you can't pour from an empty cup.
Hmm.
But sometimes it feels like self-care is the first thing to go when we're stressed.
It's true. We tend to put our own needs on the back burner when we're busy or feeling overwhelmed, but ironically, that's when we need it the most.
So we've got this fascinating interplay of individual factors, social connections, and self-care, all contributing to this idea of resilience. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that we're talking about some pretty nuanced stuff here. Resilience and mental health are complex topics, and what we're sharing isn't a substitute for professional advice.
Mm-hmm.
If you're struggling, please reach out to a mental health professional. They can provide personalized guidance and support. Okay, now that we've laid the groundwork, I'm curious to hear more about these practical tips from the Mayo Clinic. What else did they have to say?
Well, one of the tips that stood out to me was the idea of finding meaning and purpose in your daily life.
What gets you out of bed in the morning? What
Yeah.
makes you feel like you're making a difference?
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be some, grand world-changing mission. It could be something as simple as pursuing a hobby you love, volunteering in your community, or simply being present and engaged with your loved ones.
It's about finding those things that spark joy and give you a sense of fulfillment.
And those moments of joy and fulfillment can be powerful fuel for resilience, especially when we're going through tough times.
It's like having a reserve tank of positive energy that you can tap into when you need it most.
Exactly. And speaking of tapping into reserves, the Mayo Clinic also emphasizes the importance of taking action rather than avoiding problems.
So not just sitting around and hoping things will get better on their own, but actually taking concrete steps to address those challenges.
Yes. It's about making a plan and taking those steps, even if they're small, towards addressing those challenges. It's about shifting from a passive mindset to an active one.
I love that. It's empowering to remember that we're not just passive passengers in our own lives. We have the ability to choose our responses, to take action, and to shape our own outcomes.
And sometimes those small actions can have a ripple effect, leading to bigger changes and ultimately contributing to our overall resilience.
This is all so fascinating. It feels like we're just scratching the surface of this whole resilience thing. But I'm already starting to see how these different pieces fit together. It's not just about being tough or stoic. It's about being flexible, adaptable, having those strong social connections, and taking care of ourselves.
And it's about finding those sources of meaning and purpose that fuel our resilience journey.
I'm really excited to dive deeper into this in the next part of our deep dive.
One thing that often gets overlooked when we talk about resilience is the role of culture.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. How does culture come into play?
Well, the National Library of Medicine Review kind of dives into this a bit. It points out that different cultures have different ways of, viewing and fostering resilience. Some cultures really emphasize collectivism and community support, while others may prioritize individual strength and self-reliance.
That makes a lot of sense. So what might be considered resilient behavior in one culture could be seen quite differently in another.
Exactly. And it highlights the importance of understanding those cultural nuances, especially when you're working with, diverse populations. What works for one person might not work for another, and those cultural differences can play a significant role.
So resilience isn't a one-size-fits-all concept. It's shaped by our individual experiences, our social context, and even our cultural background.
Precisely. And speaking of individual experiences, the Mayo Clinic has a great tip about learning from the past. It's something we touched on earlier, but I think it's worth exploring a bit further.
I agree. I'm all about turning those past failures into valuable lessons. But how do we actually do that? How do we mine those experiences for that resilience gold?
Well, it starts with taking a conscious look back at those times when you faced challenges. Don't just dwell on the negative aspects, but really try to identify those moments where you demonstrated strength, resourcefulness, or creativity.
So it's like creating a highlight reel of our resilience moments. Those times we overcame obstacles and came out stronger on the other side.
Yes. And once you've identified those moments, ask yourself, What specific actions did you take that helped you navigate that challenge? What inner resources did you tap into?
So we're not just reminiscing, we're analyzing, we're dissecting those experiences to figure out what worked and why. Kind of like reverse engineering our own
But
resilience.
exactly. And by doing that, you're not just acknowledging your past successes, you're also creating a blueprint for future resilience.
I love that. It's like building a library of resilience strategies that we can draw upon whenever we face new challenges.
And as you build that library, remember that resilience isn't about being perfect or, never experiencing setbacks. It's about having the tools and the mindset to navigate those inevitable ups and downs with grace and grit.
It's about embracing those imperfections and recognizing that those challenges are just, an inherent part of the human experience.
And sometimes those challenges arise not from, external events, but from within ourselves. Those moments of self-doubt, anxiety, or fear can be just as daunting as any external obstacle.
Oh, absolutely. I think we've all been there. Those inner critics can be brutal. So
Yeah.
how do we cultivate resilience in the face of those internal struggles?
Well, it starts with recognizing that those thoughts and feelings are a natural part of the human experience. We all experience, moments of self-doubt or anxiety. It's about learning to acknowledge those feelings without judgment, to ride those waves without getting swept away.
Easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
But it sounds like self-compassion plays a big role here.
Absolutely. It's about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer a close friend who is struggling.
And that ties back into the importance of self-care, right?
Right.
It's about nurturing ourselves so that we have the emotional bandwidth to handle those internal storms.
Exactly. Self-care isn't selfish, it's essential. It's about replenishing our energy and resilience reserves so that we can show up for ourselves and for others.
It's like putting on your own oxygen mask first before helping others. You can't pour from an empty cup. And sometimes those self-care practices are as simple as, taking a walk in nature, listening to music, or spending time with loved ones.
It's about finding those activities that nourish your soul and help you feel grounded and centered.
And those activities will look different for everyone. It's about finding what works for you. But I think we can all agree that prioritizing those moments of self-care is crucial for building resilience.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the power of those, small, consistent efforts. It's not about making drastic changes overnight. It's about those small daily choices that add up over time.
It's like compound interest for your mental health. Those small investments in self-care can yield big returns in the long run.
And those small investments don't have to be time-consuming or expensive. It could be as simple as taking 5 minutes each day to practice mindfulness, writing down 3 things you're grateful for, or simply taking a few deep breaths to calm your nervous system.
It's about those micro moments of self-care that we can sprinkle throughout our day. And I think that's a really empowering message. Resilience isn't about some grand heroic effort. It's about those small, consistent choices that we make each day.
And those choices can have a profound impact on our well-being, our relationships, and our ability to navigate life's challenges with grace and resilience.
So it's not about waiting for those big moments of crisis to flex our resilience muscles. It's about building that resilience gradually, day by day, through those small, intentional acts of self-care, connection, and meaning-making.
Exactly. And remember, you're not alone in this journey. We all face challenges, we all experience setbacks, and we all have the capacity to cultivate resilience.
It's about embracing those imperfections and recognizing that those challenges are an inherent part of the human experience. And as we learn to navigate those challenges with greater resilience, we not only strengthen ourselves, we also inspire those around us.
It's like creating a ripple effect of resilience where our individual efforts to cultivate inner strength and well-being can inspire others to do the same.
So it's not just about personal growth, it's about contributing to a more resilient world. That's a powerful thought.
And it all starts with those small, intentional choices that we make each day.
Okay, we've talked a lot about the individual factors and strategies for building resilience.
Yeah.
But we can't forget about the importance of those social connections.
Absolutely. Those connections provide a sense of belonging, support, and validation, which are all essential for resilience.
It's like having a safety net, knowing that you're not alone in facing those challenges.
And those connections don't have to be limited to, family and close friends. They can also come from community groups, support groups, or even online communities.
It's about finding those spaces where you feel seen, heard, and understood.
And those spaces can provide a sense of belonging, purpose, and shared experience that can be incredibly empowering.
Speaking of empowerment, I'm curious to hear more about what CMH has to say about building resilience.
Well, one of their strategies that I found particularly intriguing is the idea of accepting those circumstances that we can't change.
So not fighting against reality, but learning to surrender to what is. That sounds a bit paradoxical.
It might seem counterintuitive, but it's actually a very powerful practice. When we resist or deny those things that are beyond our control, we create unnecessary suffering for ourselves.
It's like trying to swim upstream against a strong current. You're expending a lot of energy, but not really getting anywhere.
Exactly, and that's why acceptance is so important. It's not about giving up or resigning ourselves to a fate we don't want. It's about acknowledging what is so that we can then focus our energy on those things that are within our control.
It's like that serenity prayer again, right? Accepting the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Precisely. And once we've accepted what we can't change, we can then focus our energy on setting realistic goals and taking action on those things that are within our power.
That makes so much sense. It's about shifting our focus from worry and rumination to problem solving and action.
And remember, those goals don't have to be huge, life-altering things. It's about those small, achievable steps that help us build momentum and confidence.
So instead of getting overwhelmed by the big picture, we break it down into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Exactly. It's about taking those baby steps one at a time and celebrating those small victories along the way.
Because those small victories add up over time, contributing to our overall sense of accomplishment and resilience.
And those small victories can also help us build momentum, making it easier to tackle those bigger challenges down the road.
It's like training for a marathon. You don't start by running 26 miles. You build up your endurance gradually, mile by mile.
And that same principle applies to building resilience. It's a gradual process of strengthening our inner resources and developing those coping mechanisms that help us navigate life's inevitable challenges.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. From the importance of self-care and social connections to the power of acceptance and setting realistic goals. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to circle back to the concept of non-emotional inhibitory control. We talked about how this type of control is linked to resilience, but I'm still a little fuzzy on the why behind that connection.
That's a great question. It's one that researchers are still exploring, but there are a few interesting theories. One possibility is that non-emotional IC helps us develop those consistent habits and routines that support our well-being.
So even when we don't feel like it, we're still able to make those choices that align with our long-term goals.
Exactly. Think about it this way. If you have strong non-emotional IC, you're more likely to stick to your exercise routine, eat a healthy diet, and get enough sleep, even when you're stressed or tired.
And those healthy habits, in turn, contribute to our physical and mental resilience, making us better equipped to handle challenges.
Precisely. And another theory is that non-emotional IC helps us regulate our emotions indirectly.
Now, that's interesting. So even though it's not directly about controlling our emotions, it still has an impact on our emotional state.
Exactly. By regulating our actions and behaviors, we can indirectly influence our emotional experience. For example, if you're feeling anxious, engaging in a calming activity like meditation or deep breathing can help to regulate your physiological response, which in turn can reduce those feelings of anxiety.
So it's like a backdoor approach to emotional regulation.
Right.
We're not trying to suppress or deny those feelings, but we're using our actions to create a more, balanced internal state.
That's a great way to put it, and that sense of balance and stability is a key component of resilience.
It's like having a strong core that helps you maintain your balance even when the ground is shaky.
I love that analogy, and it highlights the importance of developing those non-emotional IC skills.
So how do we do that? How do we strengthen that mental muscle?
Well, it starts with awareness. Pay attention to those moments when you're tempted to give in to impulses that don't align with your goals.
So catching ourselves in those moments of, I should really go for a run, but then reaching for the remote instead.
Exactly. And once you've identified those moments, start to practice making different choices. It could be as simple as choosing to take the stairs instead of the elevator or opting for a healthy snack instead of that sugary treat.
It's about those small conscious choices that help us build that non-emotional IC muscle over time.
And as you start to experience the benefits of those choices, you'll be more motivated to keep practicing. You'll start to see that those small acts of self-discipline can have a ripple effect on your overall well-being and resilience.
This is all so fascinating. It's really making me rethink my whole approach to self-control and resilience.
Me too. It's amazing how much we're learning about the brain and its capacity for growth and change. And the more we understand about these processes, the more empowered we are to cultivate resilience in our own lives.
I'm so glad we're having this conversation. It's really inspiring me to take a more proactive approach to building my own resilience.
Me too. And I hope our listeners are feeling inspired as well. Remember, resilience is a journey, not a destination.
It's a process of, continually learning and growing and adapting to those curveballs that life throws our way. And one thing that's really struck me throughout this whole deep dive is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to resilience.
Yeah, that's so important. What works for one person might not work for another. It's all about, finding what resonates with you, what aligns with your values and your personality and your circumstances.
So it's about experimenting, trying different strategies, and seeing what sticks. It's about being curious and compassionate with ourselves as we kind of navigate this journey.
Absolutely. And remember, it's okay to ask for help along the way. Whether it's reaching out to a trusted friend, seeking guidance from a therapist, or tapping into those resources we've mentioned, like CMH or the Mayo Clinic, there's no shame in asking for support. In fact, it's a sign of strength, not weakness.
It's like acknowledging that we don't have to have all the answers, that we're all works in progress, and that it's okay to lean on others, when we need to.
Exactly. And those support systems, those connections with others, can be incredibly powerful fuel for resilience. They remind us that we're not alone in facing those challenges, that we're part of something larger than ourselves.
Speaking of something larger than ourselves, one of the things that's really resonating with me is this idea that building resilience isn't just about personal growth, it's about contributing to a more resilient world.
I love that. It's like those ripples that spread outward when you drop a pebble into a pond. Our individual efforts to cultivate resilience can inspire and uplift those around us, creating kind of a cascade of positive change.
So it's not just about taking care of ourselves, it's about taking care of each other, about fostering a culture of compassion, support, and resilience.
And that culture of resilience can start in our own homes, in our workplaces, in our communities. It's about creating those spaces where people feel safe to share their struggles, to ask for help, and to celebrate their triumphs.
It's about recognizing that we're all in this together, that we all have the capacity for resilience, and that by supporting each other, we can create a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
And those opportunities for thriving don't have to be, grand or extraordinary. They can be found in those everyday moments of connection, kindness, and courage.
It's about those small acts of resilience that add up over time. Those moments when we choose to get back up, to try again, to keep moving forward even when it's hard.
And those moments of, choosing to keep going, even when faced with adversity, are what truly define resilience. They're the building blocks of a life well lived, a life filled with purpose, meaning, and connection.
I love that. It's not about being perfect or never experiencing setbacks. It's about having the courage to keep going, to keep learning, to keep growing, and to keep believing in ourselves and in each other.
And as we wrap up this deep dive into resilience, I want to leave our listeners with a powerful quote from the author Robert Jordan. He said, "The oak fought the wind and was broken. The willow bent when it must and survived."
That quote beautifully captures the essence of resilience, doesn't it? It's not about being rigid or unyielding. It's about being flexible, adaptable, and willing to bend when the storms of life, rage around us.
Exactly. And just like the willow, we can weather those storms, we can adapt to changing circumstances, and we can emerge from those experiences stronger and more resilient than ever before.
So to our listener, remember, resilience is a journey, not a destination. It's a lifelong process of learning, growing, and becoming the best versions of ourselves. And as you continue on this journey, remember that you are not alone. There are resources available, there are people who care, and you have the strength within you to navigate any challenge that comes your way.
And remember to celebrate those small victories along the way. Each step forward, no matter how small, is a testament to your resilience.
And as you embrace those challenges, as you learn from those experiences, and as you continue to grow and evolve, you'll find that resilience is not just a quality you possess, it's a way of being, a way of living, a way of approaching life with courage, compassion, and an unwavering belief in your own ability to thrive.